Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J live from the Den Legacy Internet Radio. Thank y'all for rocking with us. You rock with us, we roll with y'all. We appreciate those folks that are listening to us during the replays on iTunes as well as on YouTube. Those folks listening to us live on our live stream on legacyinternetradio.com as well as on TuneIn and Streamer. As I mentioned before, you rock with us, we roll with y'all. Continuing the night, we appreciate our next special guest making his return to the airways of the flagship show of Legacy Internet Radio on Aint No Half Steppin' with yours truly on Legacy Internet Radio. My big brother, my partner, and my friend, David Wren, also known as Dave in LA. What's up, brother?
What's up, Marcus J? What's going on? Good to hear you. Good to finally get back on with you all. Always, always. Much love, much respect to you and family, brother.
I appreciate that, man. Before we get into the particulars and the agenda for tonight's conversation, tell the folks where they can hear you so that when they get excited about the dynamic brother that they're about to listen to again here on Legacy Internet Radio, they know where they can find you every chance they get an opportunity.
Well, Marcus J, we also from time to time, and we need to have Marcus J on Tando Radio Show, and that's on Black Talk Radio Network. We have that show Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. So we're there. We're always putting out information, and we definitely need to have Marcus J on because Marcus, as you all know, I call Marcus the Gil Noble of our time. Marcus is a real journalist, and it's critical that we have real good information, solid information that is credible, that our people can make decisions from at their dinner table, at their place of work, with their friends, because we are in very, very critical times where our response to events that are going on around us has to be appropriate to our overall self-determining and sovereign agenda, which I think is the paramount need within our overall community, our overall individual families, and us as individuals collectively. We must start to have sovereign, self-determining decisions that benefit the overall collective good of our people, our community, and of our species, and not to be blindly led by the falsehoods of the past, which tend to seem to raise up their ugly, evil seems to raise up its ugly face once again, and it continues to manipulate the masses because we blindly follow what we've been schooled in the institutions of obedience. And I think this is critical, and that's where you can find us. And these are some of the things that we talk about and go over. And I can't wait to have my man Marcus J on to, collaborate and to interface and to interact with some of our audience, and all of the audience that you have at Ain't No Half Steppin' is always welcome there. This is a place where you can find great comfort and refuge, and you are among friends. So Marcus J, that's where we can be found. Monday through Friday, but we can also be found whatever Marcus J is doing. I am always there. If I'm not there physically, my spirit and my energy is always with this brother, and it's something that we both share among ourselves because of our friendship and the times that we live in. It's so important for the collaborations, the collective collaborations that we must have and establish are strong, and our bonds are unyielding and unbreakable. So that's where we can be found, Marcus J.
I can dig it, brother. I appreciate it, man, because, I've always enjoyed our conversations and the times that we've done shows together here on mine as well as on yours. And I think like-minded brothers are imperative to advancing the plight of, our people and making sure that folks are empowered and educated and they realize, because, I'm not one that believes in leaders. You know what I mean? I'm one who believes,
right. You and I both. Right.
I'm one that believes that everybody should be a leader. And, one of, the people that I like to listen to, when I'm not actually working, is Joe Madison. One of the things he always says is, what are you going to do about it? That's like one of his phrases. What are you going to do about it? Like, we can always run our mouths and talk and do our shows and things of that sort, but what are we going to do about it? You know what I mean? And I think that's imperative, and you work, and so do I, and that's something that I think is important. What I want to get into is a couple of things, and obviously, you know, recently we've had a few incidences that have gotten the American people, shall we say, talking. And I think a lot of folks are finding out who their friends are this week and last week, this weekend and last week. And so let's talk about it. We had the shooting last week of the fella in Baton Rouge, Alton Sterling, outside of the convenience store. And then we had less than 48 hours later in Minnesota, we had the shooting of the brother outside, actually in the car in the traffic stop. His name was Philando Castile. And that one was actually streamed live on Facebook by his girlfriend. Those stories are very, very different from each other. But then again, they're very, very similar to each other. Let's talk about them. What's your thoughts?
Yes, I think it's critical that we do. I think what we have to first start, what I will first start with, I will come from my own personal opinion, and I'll come from a professional opinion from my long tenure as a police officer in Los Angeles for over 15 years. So I'll give my opinion on things, and I think it's critical and crucial that we look at the full dynamics of what's going on. And these instances and these shootings are actually are symbols and are indicators of other things that are going on. In my opinion, in my professional opinion, and not only with the shootings that you had in Baton Rouge and in Minnesota, but also in Orlando and the other shootings that are going on throughout the country, the one that was done on Thursday evening, in Dallas, what we have, in my opinion, is something that has taken place many times before in history. And because we tend not to study the history that is available to us, we are only repeat or regurgitate the testimonies of someone that has not our best interest at hand, or the interest, we regurgitate the interest of someone that does not have our best interest at hand. And that someone is not just one individual, it's a collective consortium of people. And when we look at the shootings, what we're having is, in my opinion, is a conspiracy agenda that is very live and well. And in my opinion, the shootings that you have seen of the different brothers and sisters that were killed by police officers, some of them may have been justified, but there is a real agenda that's here. And this is the agenda. The biggest problem that we have is that we have blind faith in this country, particularly within our community, the black community, particularly among us. We have blind faith in the system that has never been about preserving, maintaining our tranquility, quality of life, nor our prosperity. And this is the truth. And this is not their fault. This is our fault. And until we start to see that and start to make some self-evaluations and start demanding and creating the overall institutions that directly affect us, we will continue to see the agenda of someone else be thrown upon our people, children.
Let's talk about that because, I've had dialogue with folks several times, and particularly in our community, and there's a lot of despair, Dave. A lot of folks say, well, it ain't going to change. It's going to always be that way. It is what it is. A lot of folks want to go back to Malcolm X's speeches in the early 60s. If you listen to them today, they sound like they could be given in 2016 instead of 1963.
Right.
Having said that, we'll get back to these shootings here in just a moment, but let's kind of build a little bit more on the despair that a lot of folks feel in our community. I mean, what would you tell someone who really, feels it ain't going to change, so why even try?
Well, they're absolutely right, because it's not going to change because they're not going to do anything to change it. The first step that we have to take, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is that you have to become a sovereign and self-determining person individually yourself. You have to be a critical thinker. If you're not a critical thinker, if you're just going to regurgitate what the mainstream media puts out, what the cerebrally naive network puts out, and you can figure out who that is, and all the other governmental propaganda that's there, then the only thing that what you're doing is you're compromising your morality for someone else's agenda. That's why nothing will ever change. That brother or sister who says that is absolutely right. And that brother and sister is more dangerous than the overall agenda in itself, because that individual has surrendered their free will. And that in surrendering your free will is the only form of enslavement that can ever stand. Because, in my opinion, the great creator God Almighty has given you the ability with free will to determine to maintain your freedom. Freedom does not come by the pen of another man's hand. It comes by the overall, freedom comes by the decision of sovereignty and self-determining by the thinking mind that it wages its daily life with. So every individual, each of us have a choice. And I firmly believe that my freedom ends where someone else's begins. If someone chooses to act a certain way, if God can't make someone do something, what makes them think that I can? So that individual that would say nothing is going to change, they're absolutely right. And then there's nothing for them to complain about.
Right.
Because they aren't doing anything to bring about a different energy in a different direction. Marcus J., if we were to build a 10-story building, will we be able to sit in front of the plot of land that's in front of us and just think to ourselves and just speak about it being built and it being built? No. We are actually going to have to do what? We're going to have to invest energy to actually build it. We're going to have to dig the foundation. We're going to have to put in the pillars that are going to be grounded in the bedrock. We're going to have to put the footing in. We're going to have to put in the scaffolding, the build. There's energy that has to happen in order for that building to come to full fruition.
Right.
It has to be created. And what it is that so many of us want someone else to create something for us. And when they do create it for us, then we complain and say that it's unjust. No, it is justifiable because you allowed it to be built. And if we continue to play by their rules, they will rule. Right. We have to establish our own rules.
I had that conversation. I was debating and blogging with a white conservative recently. And he wanted to cite to me a bunch of the cases where, a lot of these shootings and things of that sort happened to white people. When you say what you just said, you reminded me of a phrase that my brother Kate Up would always use: create the world you want to live in. But having said that, what's your thoughts on the shootings? Because I want to transition to them individually, and just based on what we've seen in these cases. Let's start with the one in Baton Rouge with Alton Sterling, because I'm interested in getting your take, and then I'll share with you with some of the folks that I've been talking to what their feelings are. We can discuss it. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts on that particular shooting, and it comes from twofold. One, actually doing that job, and actually where people have actually had a gun on themselves, confronting me with a gun in hand, and there was no shooting between myself and them because I wasn't threatened. Okay?
Right.
One of the things that we have to do is that we have to look at how the police departments are trained. One, because we don't know, that's one in particularly, that's our fault. Two, The police officers that actually police our streets, we didn't hire. That's another fault of ours. One of the biggest, if there is going to be a real, sincere movement to change the interactions between our community and the police department, then our community has to hire the police officers that will be in the community. And if you're not hiring them, then you are going to be subject to the hiring process that someone else has put together. And let me tell you about this hiring process that someone else has put together. It's been purposely designed that way. In my opinion, the police departments, because of their psychological evaluations of the individuals that are candidates, that will become recruits, that will become a part of their overall academies, and then later their probationary officers, then their police officers. We have taken probably the most direct and probably the most influential individual within our community, and we've given that away to someone else to place those people. If you think about it, your individual direct contact with a police officer is probably the most influential person that you can come into your daily life with. That police officer has more power than Congress, the president, the military, or anyone else that you can come in contact on an official basis, on an everyday basis. And we allow someone else to put those individuals in our community. Where's the problem? Is it the system or is it us? It's us.
Right.
If we're not hiring those individuals based off of our vetting those individuals, based off of what we know of these individuals, from their character to their overall thought process, their overall psychological stability and everything else, we are allowing someone else to do that. And this is why you have people that come into our communities that is waiting to get there with a cowboy's mentality. Well, I say that from this standpoint.
Let me ask you this, because I want to go back and forth on this one, because you're going to get some folks that are going to say, well, we're not in power, so how are we going to be the ones that are hiring? So to that point, you say what?
Very, very easy, because you haven't placed your demands to be known. You haven't put yourself in a position of power. You know, when you're sovereign and self-determining, you don't make requests. You have demands. And we haven't placed ourselves, because this is what we've done. We've only participated in the system that has been set forth in front of us, not even seeing that that system is actually the one that is destroying our communities. So if we continue to want the system to change, for it doesn't have the compassion or the moral convictions to do it. So that means that you have to stop playing by that rules and establish your own. You're going to have to build your own building. And it's very easily done. But we have some of the greatest minds within our communities, but what our greatest minds tend to do is that they tend to try to work within the system
instead of
to establish some form. Yes, instead of creating a system that will be the one that has precedence in our community.
Right, right. I want to go back to this particular shooting as an officer. What did you see when you saw the video? Justifiable shooting or not?
Well, by law, very well could have been justifiable, because there's so many things that it hasn't everything. I'm going to tell you why this is the problem. I wasn't there, but if there was a gun in his pocket, that gives those officers the legal recourse to use deadly force. But let me tell you how it would have been handled different by me. And this is why it's so important that we start to have the right people in our communities policing. See, this is where the breakdown has been. Those officers very well may have been within the confines of the law to have a justifiable shooting. Because this is the problem. If there was a gun in his pocket, and just in the Baton Rouge, once there was a fight, they had legal right to shoot him, because there was the potential for that gun to be used against them. The law gives them the protection that if they are threatened by a gun or a weapon that can cause great bodily harm to them or anyone else, they have the right to use deadly force. Here lies the problem. When they walked over and grabbed him, that is where he needed to completely, because we don't know the law. That gun is in his pocket. He should have made his hands, positioned his hands where his hands were nowhere near the gun. If there was any struggle at all, they had the legal recourse to use deadly force. Now
that's going to be difficult for us civilians to accept, and because I know you and because I know you and I trust you, then I'm gonna go with that. But having said that, when you watch the video,
but I'm gonna tell you what would have been done in my case, and and this will make it clear as to why I say it's so important that we put the right people in these positions. But go ahead, Marcus.
No. Well, I guess I probably preempt. I probably spoke too soon because you were probably going to get to my question. But my question was, when you see the video, particularly the second one, you see that at the time of the shooting, both of his arms were at his side. He had a knee in his chest from one guy, and the other guy was holding him down. And the officer, at that point, while he was already subdued, pulls out his gun and actually shoots him. And that's difficult. It's very difficult, particularly as a civilian. You know, you can remove color from it if you want to, but you know, I guess we're more sensitive because this happens to us, you know, in a disproportionate manner. But once you see that as a civilian, it's just very difficult to take. To that, you say what?
And it is, because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you what is going to be said and what happens in that case. Wherever his hands were at that time, okay? Wherever his hands were. And I'm just going to give you what the legal recourse is going to be and what the legal precedence that has been set and what has already been stipulated as the rules for using deadly force.
Right.
Once they said that there was a gun and they recognized and they identified a gun in his pocket, his hands being out in front of him, it's very easy for the one officer that had him, the two officers that had him subdued, for one to say he was starting to move his hand in that direction. Video won't pick that up, and he could say that he was moving towards that. He changed his mind. And you know what the law is going to say? The law is going to protect those officers in that case.
That's tough.
I'm just telling you what the law is going to do.
Yeah.
Because this was the problem. They were now in a scuffle, in a fight. And once you do that, you are not going to win that fight when you have a gun in your presence, when you have officers that are on the scene and are actively trying to take you into custody. Right. Because what we don't see on video, we can see his hands out on video in whatever position. But see, he can change his mind, and all of a sudden the officer could say he started to feel him moving his arm against him and was fighting him to go for the. Once there was a resistance to being apprehended and surrendering, that is legal justification for them to use deadly force.
Deadly. You know, it's
deadly force. Because let me tell you this, because it doesn't take much for a person to go from, it's only 4 inches from where they were to where 5 or 6 or 10 inches or a foot from that hand to go very quickly to grab that gun and everything else. And what they're going to do is they're going to bring in past cases where a person has turned on the police officers really quickly with a gun and was able to get rounds off. As a police officer, you're trained to neutralize that so that does not happen.
So basically, if I'm hearing you right, I don't think that folks should be surprised that these officers may end up going home like many of the others in the past have.
They will.
Okay. Now
they will go home.
Now that brings me to the next one, the one in Minnesota, where we lost Philandro Castile. Based on what we're seeing in this video, apparently the shooting happened prior to the video being turned on and live streaming on Facebook. But as a former LAPD officer, I want you to share with us what your thoughts are on that one. The first thing you see, basically, let me back up. The woman that narrates says that he's got a concealed weapons permit, and the officer asked for it. He's in the process of pulling it out. not the weapon, but the permit. And that's when he shot, and that's when the video actually picks up. You tell me what your thoughts are on this one. Is this one different than the one in Baton Rouge?
They're very complex cases. Let me tell you why. That it's difficult because we only see a certain part of the video, and so it's very difficult to come up with a reasonable argument for or against either, because you don't know what transpired before. Yes, he could have been a legal CCW owner, and in that he goes to get his CCW permit, and the officer sees the gun, and immediately he thinks he's going for the gun,
right,
instead of for the CCW. So it's very vague. You don't know, because you don't know what actually happened. The only people that know what happened are, one is dead, was in the car, and then the officer. And then this is the bad situation that's there. If there was a gun in that car, the law is always going to side towards the officer. This is the setup that I'm speaking about, is why this is happening, because we haven't taken our rightful place. And these are the instances that you're going to continue to come up with, because you and I immediately from history look at this officer, this white officer, and there's great distrust, because history has bared that out, that we should. Okay? But see, because of history, we have done nothing active about our history to change it. We have allowed the same institutions, and I like to put it this way: the people that write laws don't have to obey them. The people that create debt don't have to pay them. The people that declare wars don't have to fight them.
Wow.
And the people that invoke governance over the people do not hold themselves subject to the people. And this is the fault of us, it's not them, because this is their system, this is what they put together, but we choose to play by their rules. So in these both instances, let me tell you what my true opinion is of this and how this could be mitigated. In Baton Rouge, because I know I've done it myself, in case in point, where I had a young child running, a teenager, 17 years old, running with a Uzi in his hand, running from me and my partner. My partner nor I shot him. By law, we could have, but you know why we didn't? Because we knew he was running from the police trying to drop the gun, because we know the community. But what did we do? We positioned ourselves so that if he changed his mind, that we could have actively engaged him to protect ourselves and everyone else, and to protect him. So by us chasing him from a position of advantage where we use cover and concealment on him, what did he finally do, Marcus J? He dropped the weapon at the appropriate time. You have to remember that people, they're startled, they become frightened, and the first thing that he did was he knew that he had a gun on him and he wanted to get it away from him. So what was the only way that he could get that gun away from him, Marcus J, is for him to put his hand on it and to get it away from him. But see, in some other community, at some other officers that would have been there, they would have shot him. And this would have been the report. They'd have showed you the picture of the gun and the gun in his hand, and then there would have been the shooting, and it would have been justifiable. See, this is why it's so important. This is what doesn't get discussed. These are the things that have to change in order for a different outcome to happen. In this case in Baton Rouge, what happened? There was a report that he had a gun. Let me tell you something about people reporting that he had a gun. That's mildly interesting. In Los Angeles, every darn call that comes out, someone says that a man has a gun, because the general population will say that so the police will respond faster.
Right, right.
It helps, but it means nothing. I'm just telling you what really happened. Then when you get there, this is where the problem was. They should have never approached him if they thought he had a gun. Because once they approach him and grab him, now there is a fight. And if he has a gun, they have justifiable, and they're going to be able to articulate creatively or honestly, and that's the key, creatively or honestly, that they were in a fear for their life because he started to go for that gun. Right. What if he was doing exactly what the young man that I had encountered, not only once, but on multiple times, where he was trying to get rid of that gun because now he had a fearful response to, oh, shoot, the police is here, I got a gun.
Would you would think that would be a legitimate response.
The public doesn't know, and this is what's being hidden from the public. And this is why you're going to continue to have this to happen until we change it.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you this. Having said those things, you know, the fact that we've got now technology and cameras, I think the first time many of us saw technology and cameras was when Rodney King got beaten in March of 1991. And I know you were in LA at the time. Were you an officer at the time?
No. I was actually, I wasn't an officer then, but I was an officer shortly after that.
Okay, yeah, because I remember you were an officer during the riot. So,
right.
So having, you know, we see it now, you know, and in these two cases, we're seeing it after, you know, the initial beginning of the encounter. And in the Baton Rouge situation, of course, we saw the altercation piece. And in the Minnesota one, we see it afterwards. Anyway, the fact that there's cameras obviously doesn't really change anything because the outcomes have not been all that different. What do you think about that?
No. Yeah, exactly. See, the camera was very pivotal in a case that the camera was, the evidence was overwhelming that there was a murder of a gentleman, was in Eric Gardner's case. See, that was the one that there's no way in the world. That was a murder, plain and simple. Eric Gardner was murdered, and it was murdered right on camera. Big difference from totally different circumstances, but the outcome was the same in Baton Rouge and in Minnesota. But Eric Gardner was a perfect example of how, once again, there was a unjustifiable murder, and it was right in front of you. Right. Because Eric didn't have a weapon. Eric wasn't fighting. Deadly force was used on Eric right away. Once you go towards a person's throat, that is deadly force in every law enforcement community in this country.
Well, it's been banned. The chokehold's been banned, you know, and I'm glad you brought up the Eric Garner for those folks who may not be familiar. That's the one in New York City where the guy was selling cigarettes outside the convenience store. And I guess he was known to law enforcement and the people in the area, and they were unhappy that he was there. And you see in the video the entire discussion and encounter, and he's basically like, "Why y'all messing with me? Leave me alone. Leave me alone." And they're, you know, they roll up on him, and they basically they take him down, and he lost his life. And you see the entire encounter, you know, which is different than, like you said, Baton Rouge as well as in Minnesota, because you don't see the entire encounter. And then, of course, in the Rodney King case, you know, you saw, you know, you didn't see what happened prior to it, but of course you saw the aftermath. Eric Garner's different, like you said, because you see the whole thing. You see the entire thing.
Yeah, right. And the circumstances are completely different. Completely different. Eric had no weapon. Eric had the right to actually, you know, Eric had the right to everything that he did. A lot of people don't know that you have a right to defend yourself from the police also.
You see, now I'm glad you said that, because, you know, I heard some analysis from Tim Wise, and a lot of folks know who Tim Wise is. He's a white man who is very, shall we say, pro-black, if that's the appropriate phrase. I've played some of his clips on the show here, and one of the things that he said in analysis of the Baton Rouge case in particular, when you talk about defending yourself, he's basically saying your natural instinct when we talk about fight or flight is somebody's, you know, fighting you is not to go limp. And so when they immediately say, stop resisting, stop resisting, stop resisting, I mean, like, your natural instinct is to not have somebody put their knee in your chest. You know what I mean? So as an officer, tell us what you mean when you say you do have the right, you know, against an officer. What does that mean? And how can we defend ourselves legally if we in fact do that?
Well, one of the things, you have a right to defend yourself from a legal arrest. It has to be an illegal arrest. But you still, let me tell you something, you have a free will. Whatever you decide to do, no one can make you do anything else. If you want to fight the police, you can do that. You have the free will to do it. And free will is so powerful, and we just have to use it in a more constructive, collective way that benefits us all and individually as well. So you have the right to do whatever it is that you want, regardless of what any law that's written. And as long as you're willing to endure the consequences of your decisions, you can do whatever you want. And I think that's very important that we have to understand. You can do whatever it is that you want, as long as you're willing to deal with the consequences and the aftermath of your decisions. So now, in the case in point, how you can defend yourself from the police is this. You have the right to defend yourself, even to the point of killing a police officer if there is an illegal arrest, and where they're using unnecessary force to effect an illegal arrest. What does that mean? What does that mean? This has been held up by the Supreme Court multiple times. But see, they don't tell you, you know, they say that there was, Bratton said that no person has the right to resist arrest. That is a lie. That is a lie, and that's not true at all, legally or constitutionally, from what, you know, is like to be used against the people. So sometimes you have to use the law against the institutions when they overstep their bounds and overreach their authority because they feel that they can, because they're so used to doing it on a daily basis.
Right.
So now, what do I mean by that? Let's say you are someone in your home, and there is, or case in point, you're in your home, and a police officer comes over to you. I'm sorry, you're in your home, and a police officer knocks at your door. You go to the door. You refuse to let the officer in. There is no warrant. Okay?
Okay.
And then the officer says, you're going to open the door. You're going to open the door. And you say, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Kicks in the door, but you happen to be a concealed carry person, right? And you have a gun in your hand. Officer enters, kicks in the door, enters and comes in, and you shoot this officer. By law, once everything is looked at, and if this officer was trying to make an illegal arrest, you're free and clear. You had the right to defend yourself.
Okay. Even if you knew it was an officer that was doing it. This has been upheld in the Supreme Court. For all of you police officers that don't believe me, I know what the law, I'm not going to tell you. You look it up yourself. And for those of you that haven't, and citizens haven't, I'm not going to tell you. I want you to look it up for yourself, because sometimes we want too many things too easy. We won't do the due diligence and the research, because when you start to investigate things, you start to empower yourself. Right.
And this is critical that we do these things. So in this case in Baton Rouge, in my opinion, how I would have handled that, if I would have got a call that he had a gun, we walk up, my partner and I, one of the first things that we're not going to do is walk up on him. We have all the time in the world. Why do we need to rush anything? I see his hands. If I see his hands, he is no threat. He has a gun in his pocket. If I see a gun in his pocket, I see the gun. I ask him, do you have a gun in your pocket? What does that do? That tells him that I know and that he knows. And I position myself to where, and I'm going to tell him what I want him to do. I'm going to give him commands right away on what I want him to do, because I don't want to unnecessarily take the life of anyone, and I don't want him to take my partner's or anyone else's life unnecessarily. But see, what happened was this. Their tactics to this whole thing was wrong. They walked up to him when they didn't have to. And I've had in my own personal time where I had a man high on PCP sitting on a wall with a gun in his hand with his head down.
Wow.
A gun in hand.
You can only imagine what was going through his mind at that moment.
He was on PCP.
Yeah, exactly.
His head was down. So what did my partner and I do? We positioned ourselves so that if he did become a threat, we could respond to it appropriately. We didn't run up on him. If we would have ran up on him, what would have happened? We would have put ourselves in danger and everyone else around us in danger.
And
this is the difference in how tactically handling things correctly and making tactical errors where people lose their lives because of it. And now let me say this, Marcus, sorry about that, real quick. If you have a cowboy's mentality, as soon as you see a gun, you're going to fire. Right. This comes and this is something that you can't know what's inside of this individual police officer's mind, because unless they tell you, they're not going to tell you what's really in their mind.
Right.
So this is why it's critical for our community to hire the right people that is going to be policing within our community.
Here's what I want to do. I want to transition from those shootings in Baton Rouge as well as in Minnesota. First of all, Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J, live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. We're talking to our brother Dave in L.A., David Wren, in reference to the recent shootings in Baton Rouge as well as in Minnesota. I want to transition to Dallas, and here's why I want to do that. We know that there was a rally, a peaceful rally by all accounts, in Dallas, recently, and there were some reports of snipers shooting and killing police officers. 11 were shot, and I believe it was 5 that lost their lives at my last count, although that may change depending on how things go. But I don't know, Dave, on this one, because there's just some strange stuff going on here. And, we can talk about what we heard, but the reality is nobody really knows. They've got reports of one of the deceased shooters saying that he wanted to kill white people. You've got Fox News, FAUX news station. They are reporting that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. They're real quick to say terrorist now when you're talking about that, but in other instances you don't hear that phrase come up. Nobody called Dylan Roof a terrorist for going into a black church and assassinating 9 parishioners after he prayed with them. Let me step off the soapbox and give you an opportunity to speak on that, because as a former officer, that day, if you had been out there, you would be blue. You wouldn't be black. So what do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to say this. There's a whole lot more to this story, in my opinion, than what is being reported. And what we are seeing is the fall and the fall of an empire. And it's been done throughout history. And because we don't study history, these things are easily repeated with the people, and they fall for it hook, line, and sinker. What we've seen in this country, we've seen all of a sudden in the past 5 years, 6 years, a overwhelming amount of mass shootings throughout the country. Have we not?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And the thing is that, in my opinion, what you've seen in Dallas, you have to look at means, motive, opportunity, and who gained from this. This, in my opinion, is a part of the conspiracy agenda. And when Texas had the beginning of the year, when Texas changed their gun laws, on our show, Tando Radio Show, I said that there is going to be a major incident that is going to happen in Texas because of this. Why? Because the system wants this to happen. There is an active move within this country to disarm the everyday citizen. And this agenda has been pushed back. But see, the thing about the conspiracy agenda is that it is relentless. It is more committed to their overall design plan than we are committed to our children. And I say that from this standpoint because this same agenda has now instituted drafting our daughters for war. And we have done nothing about it.
No, we haven't.
And so this is what's going on. This is the setup: means, motive, opportunity, and who gains from this. The very same institutions and entities and people want to disarm the general population while they maintain their overall arms in declaring wars that they don't fight. And they're going to have other people fight their wars that they decree because this is a part of the agenda. What we're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, you're seeing the move to get the general population to surrender themselves to it. And this is done by false flags, proxy wars that the agenda engages in daily throughout the world in order to maintain its overall control of the general population. Because when you have in Dallas, in Texas, it was the perfect place for this to happen, so it happened. And this was all set up by laws that were stipulated, and they were used against the people. Most people think that the governments actually wage war against each other. That is wrong, false, and a lie. They wage war against humanity. And this is a part of that war that's being waged. And this is why you'll have all the mainstream networks following the script of the talking points at hand. In my opinion, what you've seen in Dallas, it serves the purpose of the agenda to depopulate, to get the population to surrender their arms. Same thing in Orlando. What happened in Orlando? There was a community, a community, the gay and lesbian community was targeted for political gain, because the problem in that place, and I'm telling you from my experience what happened in there, those officers were told to stand down because this was all a part of the program. Whenever you have an active shooter, the first officer there is supposed to go in and engage that individual to neutralize and stop that individual, regardless of what their overall support is. This is known as active shooting training throughout the whole country. But in Orlando, they waited hours because that served the purpose of the agenda.
Right.
In Dallas,
good. I'm sorry.
Let me just say this, Marcus.
Yeah, go ahead.
In Dallas, this is going to serve the purpose. Watch what the talking points is going to be. They're going to come to, this is why we need to take firearms away from the people. But I would ask you, if the government thinks that firearms is such a threat to our overall society, what are they doing with them?
Yeah. It's funny that you make that point when, first of all, I love how you analyze things, because you come from a perspective that many of us just, I just don't even think that way. And, that's why I'm sometimes really quiet and just listen to you talk. But I'm curious, to see if the NRA and some of these gun rights lobbyists will have anything to say about, people who have legal guns, like our brother Alton and our brother in Minnesota. Both of them had legal guns. And we know their lobby is to make sure that, everyone has an opportunity to exert their Second Amendment right. But they've been, conspicuously silent on this one, as have, a lot of the, the unknown to themselves racists who wanted to give money to Dylan Roof, who just shot up a black church, and they wanted to post their outrage about a gorilla being shot, and they wanted to, support the officers who were killed yesterday, a couple days ago. but have not said a word about, Romali Graham or Tamir Rice or John Crawford or Eric Garner or any of the others. And, I can go on and on and on these names. I just find it very curious that that's what we're dealing with. Really, that's what we're dealing with. So when we talk about Second Amendment rights, that, based on what you said, I guess maybe they do have a real concern about the rights of American people to no longer have weapons. But who are we upset about losing their guns? I mean, are we upset about, the middle-class white man who in our home state of Virginia can walk around with 2 guns on his side, openly carrying? But I have to be fearful if I conceal mine, even though I'm licensed to do so. And I know that the NRA would support his right to openly carry, which in Virginia is an open carry state. And as long as you have a permit, you can conceal. So if that happens to me, it would happen to the brother in Minnesota. No one's going to say anything. No one's going to defend Marcus J, for legally concealing his weapon. Versus, my white brother who walks down the street openly carrying. I don't know any black people, and I mean any black people who openly carry their weapons, like none. And it's your right to do it. It's your right to do it. But I don't know anybody, and you can be the toughest dude, in the hood. You ain't gonna.
Wouldn't be wise.
It wouldn't be wise. You ain't gonna openly carry your weapon. You're just not. And if you're listening right now and you say, "Well, yeah, I do," I'd love to talk to you. Because I don't do that with mine because I know how I could go. You know what I mean?
Right. And I don't do that at all either because it's not wise. There are sometimes, in my opinion, there are winnable battles, and the overall objective is to be sovereign and self-determining. And in this overall quest for that, it has become a war of wills. Is more appropriately to put it as. And there has to be a strategical thought process in everything that you do. And emotions have to be taken. And whenever we make an emotional decision, and every emotional decision that I've ever made in my life has always been wrong because it's absent of reason. And I think it's very critical for us to understand that so that we can appropriately engage the adversities and obstacles that are before our community. And when I say our community, there is great benefit to dividing up the communities from people not seeing the overall community of our species. And that agenda is a part of this whole thing that is, something that we need to actually evolve into. But right now, we need to actually address the immediate threat, and that being our community.
Right.
And if we do that, Marcus J., what we're going to do is we're going to set the patterns and the precedents for how this can be done globally, and it has to be done globally. Because what is happening is a global conspiracy agenda against humanity. And if I can get this group to fight this group, then this group and that group won't be able to see who their true enemy is, nor will they know themselves. And this is the problem that we have. We don't know ourselves and our capability within ourselves, so we definitely don't know the enemy that is before us. And everything that they do is cloaked and covered and propagandized to success. And we fall for it hook, line, and sinker, even to the point where we start to project the agenda that is against us, and we don't even know it. Every time you enter a voting booth, over in Europe, they just had a major vote with the Brexit, right. Britain leaving the euro. Do the people there realize that they're being set up by the overall governments that are there to maintain their control and even get even more control over the people? See, whenever you play by their rules, whenever they set guidelines for you and you participate in those guidelines, that is going to be your fall. This is where blind faith turns into genocide. And this is why we have the massive killings. and depopulation of our communities in the manner and in the fashion in which we do.
I want to
because we're not sovereign at all. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Marcus.
I want to transition because we've got limited time here at the end.
Yep.
And so you just mentioned walking to the voting booth, and I know we hit a lot of topics and stuff tonight, and I appreciate you giving us the time that we've got. But here's the last thing, and I want to go through this real quick. You talk about walking into the voting booth, and we've got two rich 70-year-olds, basically, that the United States is going to be choosing from. And to be frank, most people who have paid attention, over the last 30 or 40 years in our country are not very happy with either of them. My deal isn't so much, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. I mean, I could break both of them down and give you specifics as to why I will not vote for either of them. But I think that it's very difficult to rationalize intellectually how a country of Gen Xers and millennials are fighting over which two rich 70-year-olds are going to lead the country for the next 4 years. What's your thoughts on that?
Regardless of which two of the same that you're going to get, because the agenda, you're going to the agenda. The agenda is giving you choices so that the agenda will actually be upheld. Either way it goes, both of them are going to get you into a global nuclear war that is going to unfold very quickly and very rapidly, to where your daughters, for every father that's listening, your daughters will be drafted. And let me tell you what they did with this so-called agenda and this conspiracy agenda did. A land without men is conquered, meaning you have no men. Some other people will come in and take over your assets, your way of life, and they will conquer you. A land without women is barren. What does that mean? You don't exist anymore. This is a depopulation program at the highest level. Best way to depopulate the planet is to give the people something that they think and give them something different. The key to magic is not to trick you, but to make you believe.
Right.
And they're going to have a war. Congress has already passed. It was back when, it was a while when Pineda was the Secretary of Defense and Dempsey was the Joint Chief of Staff. They came out and they said that they wanted to give equality to women, and they wanted them to be able to have line staff command. Basically, when they did that, I went on Tando radio show and I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is the move to draft your daughters into war. And lo and behold, 2 weeks ago, Congress passed the bill saying now they could draft your daughters. You will not recover within, and whose community puts the most people in the military? You will not recover if you don't have any women. This is depopulation. And this is the thing where they get us all caught up in all forms of emotions, and we're not being rational at all or have any form of critical thinking. So now, they're actively, as we speak, the United States is losing an economic war, a trade war, and they're going to, because of that, they're going to arrogantly start a shooting war with China and Russia, and they're going to lose. And we are going to lose massive amount of people, black people, within our community, because they're going to draft our daughters. And you know what? Because we have been so involved in this system, wanting it to accept us, we're going to fall for this pitfall, hook, line, and sinker.
Hook, line, and sinker. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. We're talking to our brother, David Wren, also known as Dave in LA. He is the host of the Tando radio show on Black Talk Radio Network. You can hear this brother, this dynamic brother, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern until 8 p.m. Eastern, Tando radio show on Black Talk Radio Network. Brother, I really appreciate you taking the time to build with us and to share your wisdom from the perspective as a learned man, a studied man, a former police officer and someone who has a unique insight as to the workings of our country and our people. Thank you, brother. I love you, brother. And I'm going to talk to you soon.
Much love, much respect, Marcus J.
Got
to have you on Tando real soon, bro. Let me know when you can.
We definitely going to talk about it. Hold the line for just a moment. We're going to take a break. Marcus J. Ain't no half stepping with yours truly. Be back in a few.